In May of 2017, we took a trip to San Diego, California. This is the second time that I've been there, the first time that my wife has been there, and it's really a great place to visit. It's very expensive to live out there, but there's a lot of things to do once you're out there. So what I want to do is share some of the highlights of our trip. The only nonstop flight from our area of New England is out of Boston's Logan Airport. So we drove from Connecticut to Boston and we flew Air Alaska. The flight was delayed by 3 hours. It was already an evening flight. It was due to take off around 6:30 in the evening. But there were some weather issues, and so the incoming plane was unable to land. They had to delay that one. So we got into San Diego pretty late. But we did fly in to the San Diego International Airport, arriving about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And the thing that's unique about this airport is there's only a single runway. As large as the city is, especially in terms of the huge conferences that they host out there, there's still only one runway. And from what we were told, that's exactly how they want to keep it. They're not going to move the airport to another location with more runways. There's really no room here to have other runways because this airport is pretty much in downtown San Diego. But you know what? It works. So when we arrived, we had to take a shuttle to the car rental building, about a 10 or 15 minute shuttle ride. And when we got our car, we made our way from the airport to our hotel on Mission Bay, the Catamaran Resort Hotel and Spa, which is the hotel that I stayed at when I was there for a conference in 2013. It's a really, really nice place, and I really wanted to stay there again. So there's the Catamaran. We stayed in the Tower building. There are some smaller buildings where you can stay as well, but I wanted a view of the bay and the Pacific Ocean, and that's exactly what we got. When you check in, this is the lobby. There's this waterfall. It's really pretty ornate. There's fish down in the waterfall, and you can see that here. Some rather large carp. And there's also a waterway that runs throughout their grounds. Well, not the entire grounds, but a significant portion of their grounds that has, again, these huge carp, turtles, and mandarin ducks, which are very hard to come by in this country because they're native to Asia. I mean, you'll find them typically in zoos and aviaries and at the Catamaran Hotel. They're very skittish in the wild, but these guys are so tame. They're so used to having people around that you can just about walk right up to them. So there's the view from our hotel room. That's Mission Bay. And we were on the 8th floor, so this is taken on the balcony of the 8th floor. And as we pan over, you can see in the right-hand portion the Pacific Ocean. So we're very close, just about a block or two away from the Pacific Ocean, and right there on Mission Bay. Okay, so we got about 3 hours of sleep because it was about 3 a.m. by the time we got to bed. And we had a private tour scheduled on our very first day at 9:30, so we didn't have a lot of time to sleep. We slept maybe about 3 hours, which was fine. So what we did every morning was walk about 10 minutes to a Starbucks because we don't eat large breakfasts. We like what they have. We love their chocolate and plain croissants. And so that's what we did, and we brought the stuff back to our hotel and ate it there. We did that every morning. So our private tour, I booked through San Diego Private Tours Journeys with Julie, and there's Julie. Julie was incredibly awesome. I totally recommend Julie if anybody is looking to have a really great private tour in the city of San Diego. So this was about a 7.5 hour tour. Our first stop was Balboa Park, which is great because I didn't know anything about Balboa Park. It wasn't even something that I had planned on seeing. But as you'll see, it turned out to be a significant part of our trip. So there is where Balboa Park is located. To orient you, here's the Catamaran Hotel up there, and then Balboa Park is down here. It's also the site of the San Diego Zoo, which I visited when I was there in 2013. But there's a lot more to Balboa Park than just the zoo. It's pretty extensive. There's all kinds of museums, some places for performing arts, various attractions, and lots of gardens to walk through as well. So it's really handy to have one of these maps, which, by the way, you can download online if you're planning on heading out this way. So the first place that Julie took us was the House of Pacific Relations and International Cottages. And it's really kind of interesting. It's a huge courtyard lined with these small cottages, each of which is from a different country. It has various things inside that relate to that country's arts and crafts and food, various types of things like that. It's hard to find them when they're open. I'm told that there are certain times when they do open up. We were lucky because unexpectedly the one from Ireland happened to be open. So we went inside of that one and talked to a woman who's from Ireland. I guess she lives in San Diego now. And she was really, really charming. But here's the one from England, for example. And here's the one from Scotland. Here's one from China. And there's a bunch of others. And also there's this plaque that commemorates Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, who actually discovered California when he landed on the shores of San Diego Bay in 1542. There's some really interesting trees. We don't have any of these trees in New England. I mean, just look at these incredible roots. Turns out they're ficus trees that have these aerial roots. They look monstrous. They're really, really unique trees. There's another video of another one of these trees. So they vary a little bit in terms of their complexity, but I've never seen any trees like this anywhere else that I've been. And then there's this huge walkway. Well, there's lots of huge walkways there. This is the Old Globe, the site of the Old Globe, one of the playhouses there. This is the Museum of Man, or at least the tower that's adjacent to it. And this is the Art Museum. We did not go inside of that one. And again, another one of these rather large promenades. And there's a huge lily pool, which was kind of cool. And Julie took our picture standing just outside of that pool. This is the Botanical Museum. There's all kinds of plants in there. We did not go in there. There's plenty of plants to see on the outside. So our next stop was the Spreckles Organ Pavilion. Behind that curved doorway is a huge organ. We did not see the organ, but they have a lot of concerts here, a lot of performances. I found this picture on the web that actually shows the organ. Then we went to the Air and Space Museum. Again, we did not go inside. We had a lot to do that day, so we really just spent some time on the outside. But notice this photo that I shot while in Julie's car. There is a Southwest Air flight that looks to me like it just took off at the airport. The airport being so close to downtown means that the planes are going to be flying quite low when they take off, and certainly when they're coming in for a landing. So they make a lot of noise, as we'll hear here. And just by chance, I caught that model jet outside of the Air and Space Museum as the plane disappeared on the other side of the museum. And I found this online because Julie didn't mention this to me. She probably didn't know that I was a Beatles fanatic. But it turned out that the Beatles actually played in Balboa Park at what was then called, I guess, the Balboa Stadium. I'm not sure which of the venues that is today, but it's in somewhere in Balboa Park. They played there in 1965, 1 year before they stopped touring. Okay, well, we made our way from Balboa Park over to the coast and the North San Diego Bay, where we saw the Star of India, a huge clipper ship. And then from there to Old Town. And this is a very historic place. There's lots of interesting shops here that you can stroll through. This is actually a diorama inside one of the buildings showing what the town looked like in 1872. And this is a map of historic Old Town. Again, there's so much to see here. We started out at Fiesta de Reyes. I'll have more to say about that later on. And then kind of made our way around these walkways as Julie was explaining all kinds of things to us as we walked around and got back to the car. Again, a map. It's really good to get maps because some of these venues are so large, it's really easy to get disoriented without a map of some sort. But again, as we walked around Old Town, we saw this beehive oven. This is actually I guess it's a one-person jail. I'd hate to think of two people in there. I actually hate to think of one person in there, but it's a jail from a long, long time ago. And this is Fiesta de Reyes. Well, I guess I should mention this now. When I was there in 2013, we were taken, all of the people who were in our symposium, I was an invited speaker in this symposium, we were taken one night to a restaurant in Old Town. And it was really great, but I could never remember the name of it. But as soon as we passed Fiesta de Reyes, I realized, oh my God, that was the restaurant. And I wanted to go back to it. And we ended up doing that on the third day of our trip. So anyway, you can see that there's a lot going on there. They have wine tastings. There's a shop that has jewelry, a general store that we walked into, a bakery, an olive oil store. You don't see that every day. Handcrafts, kitchen supplies, a copper shop, a chocolate shop, all these other things right in this area of Old Town. Okay, well, after Old Town, we just started driving around the downtown area, the gas lamp quarter, for example. There's some interesting buildings down there. Julie said this is one of her favorite buildings, the one with the two towers. And again, going through the gas lamp quarter through here. It's not a very big area, it turns out, but there's some really interesting shops and restaurants to see as you drive through. And then we were starting to get hungry. It's about 2 o'clock at this point, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And again, we started out at 9:30. We spent a lot of time at Balboa Park. So Julie drove us to the Liberty Public Market. And that's one building. That's what it looks like on the outside. And they have different places to eat in there. As soon as we walked in, I saw that there was this bar. And I really was thirsty. I really wanted one of the local IPAs. And so I asked the bartender, I told him the kind of things that I like, and he recommended one to me. And it was a local one that I had never had before called Everybody's Juicin', which is canned in Carlsbad, which is very close to San Diego. I guess in a way it might even be part of San Diego. But in any event, this was really good. Of course, I have the draft version, not the canned version. And that's actually what it looks like. Really great IPA with lots of mosaic hops, for those of you that know IPAs. And then we were looking around for things to eat. Again, this is all within that building. There's all kinds of small places where you can go, grab something to eat, and take it out to a central place to eat, right near that bar, actually. And I decided to get an empanada. I got the chicken chipotle empanada. It's interesting because they have them labeled with initials in terms of what you're getting. CC is chicken chipotle. I don't know what SP stood for, but I didn't get one of those. And then my wife had these lobster tacos. Again, something you don't really see every day. I've never seen that in New England. And then also within that building is Stone Brewing, and I've had a lot of their beers. They have some really great beers, and they have a large space with many rooms within this building. And just look at these different taps right here. Oh my God, they have so many things on tap. But I already had a beer. I didn't get anything there. And in fact, they weren't open to serve beer at that hour anyway. But they have these interesting beer chandeliers. Of course, they're all products of Stone Brewery. Kind of a unique thing to do if you're building a chandelier. Okay, after lunch, we decided to drive to the University of California at San Diego, which is absolutely huge. It occupies a large area with many, many buildings spread out throughout campus. And in fact, Julie told us students have to call Uber just to get from one class to the next. So we started out by walking around a little bit in the School of Engineering, and right near that is the Theodore Seuss Geisel Library. Theodore Seuss Geisel. Theodore Geisel, his middle name is Seuss, and yes, he is actually Dr. Seuss. These buildings are really pieces of art, as Julie was telling us. They're not just ordinary buildings. And in fact, to get up to that one, you have to go up this snake walk. And so we didn't go up this walk. This is where we were at the bottom, which is the tail of the snake. But if you look at it from the air, so again, we were down here, and basically you would follow the snake to the top where it gets out at the Geisel Library, right on top. We also walked past something called Fallen Star. You might think that this is a house that was dropped by a tornado onto one of the campus buildings. It's actually an incredible piece of art by a Korean artist named Doho Seo, or Sue. Or I'm sorry, I don't remember how it's pronounced. But there it is, a little bit closer. And this was so fascinating, I actually am going to include a short video that describes what this is all about.
We followed Doho's work for a while before inviting him to the campus in 2006. He's thought long and hard about the idea of home. When he first came to this country to go to graduate school, he came from Seoul, Korea, and came to go to RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence. He felt completely displaced and disoriented, like he'd been dropped from the sky into a whole new world. He's thought about how a house becomes a part of you. Your home is a part of you. He wanted to make this a physical house that had come from afar. People have compared it to The Wizard of Oz and the tornado picking up the house and sending it up into the air.
This, more than any other piece in the Stewart collection, involved a collaboration of different people, different disciplines. It was experimental on the one hand, like every piece in the Stewart collection, but it was the most complicated, the most complex from a standpoint of construction and design. The cottage was built down on Warren Mall, on the plaza, where everybody could see it over a period of months. This construction that was happening in the middle of the plaza, slowly becoming a house. And then one day, and this was one of the big events of the year, people came running from all directions to watch the hoisting of this house to the top of the building. The construction workers, the company that orchestrated the whole thing, Pacific Southwest Structures, were truly heroes in making this completely unique thing come off without a hitch. This artwork does something and exists on different levels in a way that I have never seen, and that I think is unique among all works of art in public spaces, because it is, on the one hand, so very, very public, way up on top of this building, visible from miles around. It has this abrupt and amazing look from down below. And then as you get closer to it and go upstairs and go into the garden and go into the piece itself, it acquires this really, really personal dimension.
The house is very familiar once you're in. It is familiar, but it is not familiar feeling. You have to adjust, just as Doho did when he came here. You have to adjust both mentally and physically, in the case of this house, to your new surroundings. Of course, we had to furnish the house, and it had to have wallpaper. The wallpaper guy was luckily a perfectionist. It's on a tilt, so it was very hard. There's not a plumb line in the whole house. There are comfortable couches and chairs. Everything's scaled down. We found smallish things in thrift shops and around. Some of it is genuine antique and some of it is not. But it's a mix, like all homes, of various sort of household items, including family photographs, including a television which works, including steam, which appears to be smoke coming out of the chimney. There are clocks that have the correct time. There are lights that come on at night. It does appear that somebody is living there.
The garden is intimate. It's scaled down. The bricks of the pathway are scaled down. The furniture, the Adirondack chairs in the garden are scaled down. All of the plants are selected because they have smaller leaves and because they can be seen as slightly miniaturized. The house itself is about 75 or 80% of full size. So it feels like a full-size house, but it feels like a very, very small house. The door jamb, for instance, is somewhat lower than a normal door jamb. A tall person has to duck when they step inside. Nothing in the house is straight except for one thing, the chandelier that hangs straight down from the ceiling, which looks for all the world like an incredibly crooked, magically sort of crooked chandelier.
We're very excited about this project and to have it open. There were many who said it couldn't be done. How could you possibly do this? But with persistence and the collaboration and cooperation of this whole team, we made it happen. And we think it's an unforgettable one that will be in many people's minds for generations to come.
Well, you certainly don't see that every day. But no one lives there, by the way. But it is open to visit certain days and certain hours of those days. We did not have time to pursue that. It might not have even have been open when we were there because our private tour was an overview of the city and surrounds, and so there was not a lot of time to spend in any one particular location. But I'm really glad that we got to see that from the outside. It's a very unique building. Well, from there, we did something that I really wanted to do. I just didn't realize that it was going to be on this tour. It was something I was going to do on a different day, but the fact that we did it on our first day saved me the time to do it from doing it on our third day. So we went to the Coast Walk. And you go up this path. It's the Coast Walk Trail that I guess was first landscaped in 1860. And that's what the trail looks like today. And as you walk along, you can see all of these various coves and cliffs and all kinds of sea life. There's a cave down there, and there's sea lions everywhere and all sorts of birds, people walking around, kayakers. They're actually on a tour. There's a kayak tour that takes them there. And there's some sea lions. And some pelicans. I don't know the exact species. It's a West Coast species of pelican, I believe. And some other seabirds as well. So there's a lot to see there. It's a really special place to visit. Okay, well, that was the end of our 7.5-hour tour. We drove back. Julie drove us back to the catamaran. And I wanted some more exercise because we were doing a lot of riding around. And back home, I'm used to getting a lot of exercise. So my wife decided to rest because, again, we were both operating at about 3 hours of sleep, but I wasn't feeling it very much. So I decided to walk on the Mission Bay Boardwalk and the Pacific Beach Boardwalk. So there's our hotel, the tower, and there's the boardwalk. There's a little pointer that I'm manipulating. I actually recorded this video using Apple Maps, the 3D feature of Apple Maps, which is why it's not moving very smoothly, because I'm just scrolling down with my mouse. But I followed the boardwalk a portion of the way down. I had walked a longer segment of that when I was here in 2013. But I crossed over on this side street. You can see it's a very close jaunt over to the Pacific Beach Boardwalk, which lines the Pacific Ocean. And so I walked in this direction intentionally. There was something that I wanted to see that we'll see in a few minutes. I walked a bit of a distance to get to it. But it was pretty congested. There are many more people on the Pacific Beach Boardwalk than on the Mission Bay Boardwalk. A lot of bikers, a lot of skaters, dog walkers. And that's what I wanted to see. It was this pier that Julie told us about. Notice that there's houses on this pier. They're actually small cottages, and I think Julie told us that you can rent them out. And then, after you get through where the cottages are, you walk out to the end of the pier. You can actually fish off the end of that. Nobody was fishing when I was there that afternoon. But zooming in on those cottages, Julie told us that the ones near the end, that would be toward the left-hand side of the screen, because of the waves coming in, and that's the first part of the pier that gets hit, there's a lot of movement that you can feel if you're in those cottages. She said she wanted to actually rent one of these days, but had not gotten around to it quite yet. So here's the Mission Bay Boardwalk that I walked down, and then the Pacific Beach Boardwalk. A lot of people, bikers, and then there's the pier. So I took this from the boardwalk, and you can see those houses. Now I'm on the pier, walking down the pier with the houses on either side. The only cars they allow through are obviously the ones from the people who are renting those units. You can't just drive onto that. You have to have a special card to open a gate. And then here I am on just the far pier portion, walking to the end. And then there's a photo, actually, that the tall building in the middle, that's our hotel. A photo of the beach taken from the end of the pier. A short video that I made. And again, that tall building, that's our hotel, Catamaran. And then there were the houses. And again, that's from the end of the pier and walking back. So I went back to the Mission Bay Boardwalk, and when I got back, there was this riverboat, paddle boat, that was docked by the dock that belongs to to the Catamaran. I went up to our hotel room and shot this photo. I'd not seen that boat before. We later discovered where it was docked. It was docked permanently at another portion of Mission Bay, but you could take rides on this if you wanted to. We did not do that. So now it was getting later and we wanted dinner, so we ate at the hotel's restaurant. Nothing I had actually planned to do, but we really were so tired we didn't want to drive into town. So we ate at the Oceana Coastal Kitchen, which is right there at the Catamaran, and it turned out to be a good choice. And in fact, Julie told us that it had changed hands not too long ago, and it had been getting excellent reviews. And when I went online to TripAdvisor and Yelp, I saw that people really liked this place a lot. So I was pretty eager to try it out, and it saved us another trip into town. So one thing that's unique, they have this tank that is loaded with jellyfish. There weren't this many jellyfish when we were there. Here's a short video, very short, of what was there. You can't see all of the fish. The lighting here is very bad. It's nothing but jellyfish. Kind of hypnotic to watch that. Our table was right next to the tank. Actually, I asked for a table right next to the tank. And we had a bottle of wine, which we typically do, a California Syrah. My wife had king crab legs, and that's what they look like. I had the 2-duck risotto. Both of these dishes were delicious. Okay, so day two. Day two, I had already bought tickets to go to the San Diego Safari Park, which is about 35 miles north of San Diego in another town called Escondido. So we got our rental car out of the parking lot and drove to the San Diego Safari Park. And there's the entrance to the park. And again, you need a map. This map, by the way, was not easy to navigate. I've seen better maps, but nevertheless, it helped a little bit. I also had booked a tour, the Caravan Safari Tour, the African version of that. There's an Asian version of that as well. But we got there early enough that we weren't ready to begin the tour. It hadn't started boarding yet. So we walked around a little bit. That's a view of the park. The tour actually goes out to some of those locations. And then there's the areas where you can actually walk around. You can see in the lower left-hand corner. So right when you enter the park, the first building you come to, if you want to go through it, is Wings of the World. It's an aviary. So birds are flying around freely. They cannot get out. And I saw some species I'd not seen before, like the white-crested laughing thrush. These birds are so used to people, they'll just fly right next to you. The southern bald ibis, rather large bird. The Victoria crowned pigeon, sort of a large-sized pigeon. It's larger than the common pigeon, the rock dove. Okay, so then we started walking toward where we had to get to board the caravan tour, passing by these flamingos on this pond. And we were still a little early, so we took a side trip to look at the tiger that was there. There were a couple. This is the one that we saw. And then finally, it was time to go on our caravan safari. So this is the truck that takes you around, and you cannot get out of that. You wouldn't want to get out of that because the animals will walk right up to it. They are all just walking around freely, as you can see here. So as we began this tour, this is a photo that I shot. They also have those balloon rides if you want to go up in one of the balloons. We decided to not do that because the caravan tour was about 2 hours long. And there's a baby rhinoceros right over there standing next to its mother and some other rhinoceroses nearby. And so we got some pretty good shots of the baby following mom. Some deer in the background. So I'm shooting this from, of course, the caravan. So they weren't very far away. I wasn't using any kind of telephoto here.
The ladies' room. That's very nice. How precious is that? Have you guys ever been close to a rhino before? But a mom with a baby? You know, other animals, if you were around them, you would be in danger. We're not in any danger whatsoever. That's the cool thing about rhinos. They've never charged the truck. Yeah, she knows we're the paparazzi. Gonna make them famous.
Yeah, if you couldn't hear that, our tour guide was explaining that the rhinos never charged the truck. You know, never say never, but we certainly had no problems. Rhinos are very vicious animals in the wild. You would never get this close to a rhino. If you were to get this close to a rhino, what would happen next would not be very good for you.
When an animal is dark and large and horned like this, they know how to use their weapons, and they mob the lions. Yeah.
Yeah, a lion would not fare very well against those horns. They can protect themselves pretty well against a lion that might be trying to prey on them. Well,
Going going, keep going.
Then this giraffe decides to give us a visit.
Flight line tower.
Turns out this is actually part of the tour. This and or other giraffes come right up to the truck because they want to be fed. That's our tour guide.
Work for it. Okay. Oh, I don't have any.
So she handed out leaves to each of us, giving us very specific instructions of what to do and what not to do. For example, you got to feed the giraffe with the hand that's facing the outside of the truck because their heads weigh a lot. I think she said 35 pounds. It might have been much more than that. I forgot. But she said, you know, if the giraffe got its head inside the truck and accidentally swiped you with its head, not intentionally, they're not aggressive, but, you know, you could get hurt big time. And she told us, you know, make sure that we didn't have certain things around that the giraffe might want to steal. I forgot what some of those things were. We didn't have any such things. But nonetheless, she also told us do not pet the giraffe, just feed it. Giraffes, I didn't know this, giraffes do not like to be touched on their head. In fact, they actually hate it a great deal. So we could feed them, but not touch them. So here I am,
It stays outside.
feeding the giraffe.
Got it. Isn't he gorgeous? You can see your reflection in their eyes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So for those of you that have Zoom, you can get the entire truck in his eyeball.
Oh really?
Yeah. He holds his head still enough. Yeah.
He's got a nice tongue, very sexy tongue.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very gentle. Well, you
Yeah,
want
he
video?
is.
You take the
You're a
video.
gentle.
He doesn't bite.
Yeah, he really was very gentle, which was good. This is a wild animal, for God's sakes. Here's my wife.
His name. This guy's name is Habari. Means like what's happening or how's it going or what's up in Swahili. Yeah.
It's just the camera angle. It looks like she's about to kiss that giraffe. She's further away than that. You wouldn't want to do that. You don't know where that giraffe has been. Actually, we do. These are Thompson gazelle.
No, right?
I know, but there's one right here.
These are two males. Here's a third. They use those horns for dominance battles with one another, establishing who's going to be the most dominant one. They don't hurt one another. They certainly don't kill one another or anything like that. Then we got visited by this rhinoceros. Our tour guide said that sometimes this happens, but it doesn't happen reliably. The giraffe happens all the time for every tour that they do, but not necessarily the rhino. Nothing bad happened to the horn. The rhino actually rubbed it off. And apparently that is known to happen. It's not bad. I guess it grows back. I don't know. But nonetheless, we were then able to feed the rhino pieces of sliced apple. So there I am doing it. And it's okay to pet these guys.
There you go.
You do that in the wild, you'll lose your limbs. Again, you would not even get this close to a rhino. So that's kind of special. Here's my wife feeding the rhino. And again, everybody took turns feeding both the giraffe and the rhino. And then the rhino is spraying, watch this, right there. Fortunately, the aim was downward, so none of us got sprayed. Well, after the tour, again, it was about 2 hours long, we wanted to see the gorillas, so we're walking around the places of this safari park where you can walk, because there was a baby gorilla there, and I wanted to see the baby. Actually, it's a big attraction. Lots of people want to see the baby. That's not the baby. That's an adult. But there he is, over on the far left. There is the baby gorilla. I forgot how old it was at this point. It was not very old. And then we saw some other stuff. I really wanted to see the ring-tailed lemurs. I'd been very close to one at one point, years ago, back in college. I won't get into the details, but I was within a foot away of one of these guys. They have captivating eyes. You can't see it so much in the video. You can see it better in this still shot. It's very easy to have a stare down with these guys. They'll just stare right back at you like that. It's kind of spooky, but kind of neat. Okay, well, after the zoo, we went back to the hotel, rested for a short while, and then drove to Old Town, to our restaurant that we wanted to go to, Casa Guadalajara. And this is a Mexican restaurant, obviously, in Old Town. And the reason we chose that one is that Julie recommended it. I asked her what's her favorite Mexican restaurant in Old Town. She's a local. She would know. And she has no vested interest in her recommendations. She said, hands down, it's Casa Guadalajara. And she was absolutely right. Well, we only tried 2 of the restaurants. They were both excellent. But this one is really, really, really good. So that's what it looks like on the outside. You walk around to the side to enter. There's a mariachi band. I shot this from our table. So they roam around the restaurant at different locations and play. They don't go table to table. They don't come right up to your table. But that wouldn't work with that many musicians and a loud trumpet. But nonetheless, it was very, very, very festive, a very colorful restaurant. Really enjoyed our dinner there. It was the first time we had margaritas. A little bit of history here. I had a bad experience, back in the early 70s by having a tequila drinking contest with somebody that I never should have gotten involved in. I'd never had tequila before. And I got so sick after that, I just never went anywhere near anything containing tequila again. And I have some friends that I go out with every couple of weeks to dinner. And when we go out to a Mexican restaurant, these guys always have tequila. There's a guys' night out kind of thing every couple of weeks or whenever we can manage to get together. And I never had a margarita. And so I decided, okay, and I announced this to my wife in advance. We are going to be in San Diego. If we're ever going to have a margarita, that's the place to have a margarita. So I said, I am going to have a margarita. And so she said, okay, she'll have one too. So I asked my friends, what kind should I get? And they said, avoid the really fancy stuff. It's not worth it. Just get the house margarita, whatever version of it you want. So that's exactly what we did. There were a lot of specialty margaritas on the menu, but we both had the margaritas de la casa, the house margarita. I had the lemon lime. My wife had the raspberry. The lemon lime is more of the authentic version of a margarita because that comes on the rocks with salt around the rim. My wife's raspberry one had crushed ice in it, kind of more like a smoothie almost, and no salt around the rim. So they're a little bit different, but still made as the house margaritas, 2 variations of the house margaritas. We both like them a lot, actually. So I'm now going to have margaritas when I go out with my friends, at least to a Mexican restaurant. So anyway, I had the pollo and mole pipián verde, and I'm probably slaughtering the way you pronounce that. But this was, I actually asked our waiter, I said, I want one of the chicken mole dishes. There were two to choose from. I was going to get the other one, the one that's made with the mole that's made with the chocolate. It's a darker mole. He said, this is his favorite. This one is his favorite. He said, absolutely get this one. So I said, okay, because I've not seen this version back home in Connecticut. And it was absolutely delicious. And you can see from what's on the screen exactly what it was made of. My wife always gets seafood, so she got the signature dish, and that turned out to be tequila lime shrimp, and she said that was really good as well. Okay, we went back to the hotel, and then the next day was our last full day at San Diego, our third day, and so we decided, based on what Julie showed us on our first day, to spend a fair amount of time back at Balboa Park, checking out some of the things in more detail that we wanted to check out. So we started out with the Museum of Man because there were 3 exhibits I was interested in. Again, there's the outside, a very ornate front piece, by the way, to the Museum of Man. The first thing that I wanted to check out was a relatively new exhibit called Living with Animals. These are all pretty small exhibits, which is what I like. I don't like these long, extensive things that a lot of museums have. But animal behavior is my research area, was my research area. I'm retired now. But I wanted to see this because this is stuff that I talked about in my animal behavior course, and how humans and animals coexist in different ways. And so this talks about the history of domestication to some extent. This is as you enter that exhibit. And part of that history, by the way, is something that I did spend a lot of time talking about in my course. This is a Russian geneticist named Belyev, and he bred from wild silver foxes, created this domestic breed that you can get. Here it says $8,900. I've seen them go for more than that. They're very expensive, but they're fairly docile as foxes go. It's a domestic breed of fox, bred from a very aggressive wild breed, the silver fox. And they also talked about pets and pests. So here we're dealing with pests, rats that apparently make their way from country to country in people's luggage. I've never opened up my luggage and found a rat. How they would get into luggage, I have no idea. But nonetheless, apparently it does happen. So as we left that exhibit, we then went to this one. I hadn't planned on going to it. It was called Monsters, but it was a very small exhibit, so we walked through really, really quickly. There was this board of quizzes. So there's a bunch of these boards that are side by side. I'm zooming in only on this one because I was curious about this one because I'm a fan of all the Alien movies. And this, of course, is the Alien Queen. And by each of these different things, they asked this question, monster or not a monster, and you would pull this open to get the correct answer. And so I pulled this open, and it said that it was inspired by a monster. And this was news to me. Inspired by a deep-sea creature called an amphipod. They're really, really tiny. But basically, the amphipod makes its, as you can see here, makes its home inside the body of another species after eating all their insides. And that is part of what happened in the very first Alien movie. And so apparently this must have inspired in some way the alien monster. I know a lot about those films, but I've never heard this mentioned before in any of the director commentaries or anything like that. But here's what an actual amphipod looks like. Again, look at the scale, 1 millimeter. These guys are just a few millimeters long. Really tiny. That's what the Alien Queen looks like, okay? Inspiration or not, I have no idea. But in any event, the exhibit said that it was. So who knows? Here's one that I really wanted to see. Beerology. Because beer is something that is found all over San Diego. They have a lot of craft beers there. And so I really wanted to see this exhibit. And one of my friends at home brews his own beer. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to take as many pictures of this as possible. And you're going to see just about all of them here. If I'm not going to spend time on them, this video will go way too long. It's probably already way too long. But if you're interested, you can certainly pause the video and read the screens. As you walk into the exhibit, you see this display with bottles of beer behind this bar on either side. So there's the ones over on the left side and the ones over on the right side. And if you're familiar with a lot of the breweries, like Ballast Point, for example, you will certainly find a lot of the beers there. There's Stone, and there are many others there as well. And so they give the various ingredients. Again, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. So if you want to read these, just use your pause button. Rice, corn. A lot of these have historical value. Barley, wheat, and of course, hops, as well as yeast. So this was a series of exhibits called the Home Brew Mart, and talking about how you go about making beer, 4 steps: mashing, boiling, fermenting, and bottling. And so as you walk through this, there's mashing. It explains what mashing is all about. Boiling, with an explanation. This is where the yeast is added. And then bottling. Water, the kind of water you use, very important ingredient. It was our understanding from something that somebody told us, maybe Julie, that San Diego water is really ideal for making certain types of beer. So they'll just use regular San Diego water to make some of the beers out there. And then we go through some of the history of this beerology exhibit. A lot of different parts going back to the Incas. There's various beer goblets. Amazons. Again, there's a lot to read here, so pause if you like. Various objects that are associated with beer making, and I guess beer drinking. There's a serving bowl, okay. China. The world's oldest beer from China. And various vessels going back to early days of China. Egypt. Beer for breakfast. I like beer, not for breakfast. I gotta have coffee. Europe. Of course nuns drink beer, why wouldn't they? Mesopotamia? You can see the shadow of my camera, by the way. No way around that, the way the lighting was. Again, various objects, vessels for drinking beer. It's a really cool exhibit. It looks like it occupied a large space. It didn't. It was all compacted into a relatively small area. The Incas, and then I went on to my next stop after that. This is the other exhibit I wanted to see on cannibals. My wife wanted no part of this. Actually, she's not a beer drinker, so she didn't go to the beer exhibit either. We split up at that point. She went to see something about ancient Egypt, and I saw beerology, and then the cannibal exhibit, which is actually at a building right across the way, but it's part of the Museum of Man. You know, in the literature they said this is not a disgusting exhibit, it's a historical one, and they're absolutely right. I found it fascinating. You walk in and there's this curved wall, and it shows a lot of modern popular culture, that have dealt with cannibalism in various ways, various motion pictures and books. Lots of artwork as well that portray cannibals. Again, if you're interested in reading any of this, just hit your pause button. I found this interesting. I never, these Hannibal Lecter figurines, really? I had no idea that somebody had made, from The Silence of the Lambs, a Hannibal Lecter figurine. But there it is, right there. And same thing here, this Texas Chainsaw Massacre figurine. Separating myths from reality, some artwork, some of those will look familiar to some of you. Novels that dealt with cannibalism. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, one that's really known for cannibalism. Columbus, I didn't know this. Columbus actually came up with the word cannibal. I had no idea that it originated with Christopher Columbus. This was fascinating. This was a huge book, and you could flip through it. They were talking about how pharmacists from long ago, this dates back to 1747, this book dealt with how you would use different body parts to create different types of potions for different types of cures and things like that. So I photographed just the first section of this book. It wasn't a huge book, but it went on and on for a ways. So it was only this first part that dealt with what you would use different body parts for. So again, if you want to read this in detail, just pause. Here's the next 2 pages. And the next 2 pages. And the last page. That was really interesting. The book was, by the way, the paper was intentionally crumbled that way to make it look like it was a really old book, because it was a really old book. Though I'm sure this was just a replica. Well, it had to be a replica, otherwise they wouldn't have it where people could just flip through it. And then continuing on with the exhibit, they showed some instances where people had no choice in terms of surviving other than to resort to cannibalism. There was a film clip, for example, a series of film clips from the Chilean air disaster where where that plane crashed in Chile, and people actually had to resort to cannibalizing some of the people that didn't survive the crash. And then as you walk on, you get these other exhibits. Flesh boogers, or is it fecal transplant boogers, or is it just boogers? I don't know. That's disgusting. And then this is one of those pull open things again. The question for each of these is, which of these animals exhibits cannibalism in the wild? And the answer, of course, is they all do. You may not know that, but they all do. I've actually seen a shark eat another shark. This was a captive shark in an aquarium. Okay, after the Museum of Man, we wanted to walk through, and we did walk through, the Japanese Friendship Garden. I like Japanese gardens a lot. I especially like bonsai trees. And there were, in fact, some bonsai trees there, but that was a very small part of this very peaceful setting. So you walk through, here's a part of the exhibit, this waterfall with huge carp. Just like at our hotel. And there's various paths to walk along. This one has this stream There's some mallard ducks. I'm shooting this from a bridge right up above them. Some smaller fish, goldfish, which are carp, small carp. Very peaceful setting. And that's a different waterfall, by the way, not the one that I showed you before. There's a guy on a bridge above the waterfall. Okay, so then we started walking around Balboa Park some more, and I wanted to really get a picture. I finally was able to get a good picture of these jacaranda trees. I knew the name jacaranda from Liverpool because I visited Liverpool, and one of the early clubs that the Beatles played in was, in fact, the Jacaranda. And as part of our private tour in Liverpool, we were taken into the Jacaranda, which was really kind of neat. And so I'd never seen a jacaranda tree before, but here they are. They're found throughout Southern California, I guess, or certainly throughout San Diego. They have these very distinct purple leaves. Then we went to the desert garden. I love cactuses, and I wish we were able to grow them in New England, but we cannot do that. It's the wrong climate. But I saw cactuses there like I've never seen before. I've never seen a cactus like this. And so we were walking around there, all different kinds of cactuses. Some of these I had seen before, but many of them I'd seen there for the very first time. Really nice place to walk. Again, I'd never seen a cactus like that. I've been to Arizona, I've been to Tucson, and I did see cactuses, but nothing quite like that. Maybe they have them and I just didn't see them, I don't know. You can see I like cactuses. Okay, enough of that. I think this was our last stop, the Air and Space Museum. We didn't go inside, but my wife wanted her picture taken by this Blackbird A-12. And this was used by the CIA for 5 years to fly missions over Southeast Asia. Apparently, it was a very secretive plane. This is a reconstructed model of it. At first, my wife thought this was the real thing, but she did some checking online when we got home, and it's not the real thing, it's a reconstruction, but apparently a very accurate one. And this is right outside the museum, so she wanted her picture taken next to that, so I took her picture next to that. It's a very large model. I had to step back quite some distance in order to get the whole thing in frame. Then we went to the next stop on our third day. This is something I was really looking forward to on this trip, going to the Ballast Point Brewery in Little Italy, because I like Ballast Point IPAs a lot. I buy them back home in Connecticut, several versions of them. Of course, Sculpin, which is the go-to one. I've also had Dorado and some of the other ones as well. So this was very special for me. And there I am standing outside the entrance to Ballast Point. And again, so many things on tap. It was just incredible. We didn't have any, though, because we signed up for a 1-hour tour, and I knew that they were going to give us samples on the tour, and I didn't want to have that much to drink because we hadn't even had dinner yet, and I knew I was going to get a margarita at dinner. So I passed a lot of these up, which was unfortunate. As I look at these here, I can see that there are some that are limited, and I would not be able to get back home. Turns out the ones that we did have on the tour were two that are limited, so at least I got some limited beers. But again, you can just see what's on that wall and the various beers on tap. which these people are enjoying immensely, I'm sure. And that's the brewing room. I'm looking through a glass wall right there. And that's we went in there to have our tour. And so when you enter, there's this huge mural. I mean, the artwork is incredible. And it's the same artist that does all of the artwork for the various labels of Ballast Point beers. I really like this one a lot. I don't think this ever appeared on an actual beer. Maybe it did, but if so, I'm not familiar with which one that could possibly have been. But so now we're inside that room having the tour. The cart contains the beers that we sampled. And so the guy's explaining the whole process to us. Having been to the beerology exhibit, I was already pretty well familiar. Plus my friend who brews his own beer in Connecticut, he already told me a lot of what this guy was telling us. So I was already somewhat knowledgeable. Those are, on top are some of the beers that we tried. We tried 2 of these beers. Copper, which was a bitter ale. It wasn't horrendously bitter. I mean, it was bitter, but it was very pleasant. And this was really sour. I'd never heard of this one before. Sour Winch. Really sour. If you don't like sour, this is not a beer for you. I happen to be fine with sour, so I enjoyed this one as well. And that is, again, part of the tour, one of the rooms that has all these various storage containers for beer. And another one, you can see it's monitoring the temperature and everything in this room. It's a very cold room, by the way. These had to be kept cold. This is actually the room that houses the beer that goes to the taps in the other room. So each of those hoses on this side of the wall leads to a tap on the other side of the wall. And so that's where all of the beers from those various taps come from. Okay, our final stop of the day, Old Town. Wanted to walk through Old Town a little bit more, but also have dinner at the restaurant that I had dinner in back in 2013, Casa de Reyes, which is actually part of Fiesta de Reyes. So Fiesta de Reyes is this courtyard, right? There's all kinds of shops around the courtyard, and there's 2 restaurants there. One is the main restaurant, and that's Casa de Reyes. So there's Casa de Reyes there. So you walk into that, and we sat down. And this is exactly what I had remembered from when I was there in 2013, even though I'd forgotten the name of the restaurant. I remember sitting next to one of these round structures containing coals and fire. When I was there in November, it was later at night. It was pretty cool. And so it was kind of nice sitting by that fire. And so this was excellent. They both of the restaurants we went to, Casa Guadalajara and Casa de Reyes, they were both excellent. I'd recommend both of those to anybody. But again, I was looking forward to having one of their margaritas. So our waiter explained that the Pure House margarita doesn't have any of those extra things added to it, like mango or strawberry or peach or raspberry. He said, if you want the pure margarita, just get the plain one, which is basically going to have what you see listed above: gold agave tequila, orange liqueur, and house-made sweet and sour. So that's what we both had, and that's what they looked like. And they were really good. Very similar. Mine was very similar to what I had the day before. I wouldn't be able to tell you which one was better. They tasted very, very similar to me. I had chicken mole poblano. So something that I like at my favorite restaurant back in Connecticut, Mexican restaurant back in Connecticut. So I was eager to try their version. Their version was actually a little bit difficult to eat because it was bone-in. It was a quarter of a chicken with the bone, so I kind of had to dig my way through the sauce, find the meat, and then get it away from the bone. The version that I have back home in Connecticut, it's boneless breasts, so it's a bit easier to eat. But this was absolutely delicious. And my wife had a Suiza shrimp burrito. That's what that looked like. Hers was easier to eat. And this is still within Fiesta de Casa, a very ornate sculpture, of course, a pepper tree that's sculpted to look like this woman. And then we started walking around the courtyard of Fiesta de Reyes, visiting these various locations. Okay. Early the next morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, we got up because we had an early flight, had to drive to the airport, turn in our car. So now we're heading back to Boston on Air Alaska. Again, a nonstop flight. This one was on time, thank goodness. And landed at Logan. We had to get my car out of the economy lot. So Route 88 of the airport shuttle at Logan goes to the economy lot. And there's the economy lot. I rescued my car, and of course I had to pay for it. Nothing is free. And then drove back on the Mass Pike to Connecticut, toward Hartford. The Mass Pike was packed. This is Memorial Day weekend. It's a Friday on Memorial Day weekend. The Mass Pike is always busy on the weekend, on any Friday. But add to that a holiday weekend, and oh my God. So yeah, there were backups, but I wasn't surprised. I knew that was going to happen, but nothing overly serious. It was just very slow-moving traffic, very little in the way of stop and go. So that's it. That was our great trip to San Diego. I recommend San Diego as a vacation spot for everybody. This is really a great place to visit in the United States.